As the military strikes between the United States and Israel and Iran intensify on the ground, a parallel war is being waged in the palm of your hand. Over the last 72 hours, social media has been flooded with a wave of unvetted comment and content from AI-generated videos of Iranian jets over Dubai, garnering over 200 million views, to recycled footage from decade-old chemical explosions that are being passed off as fresh strikes on Tel Aviv. So from deepfake imagery to hacking groups, the war in the Middle East comes at the very height of image manipulation. But how can we separate genuine reporting from wartime propaganda? This is a question that we ask. We pose it to CEO of Decode Communications, Lorato Tshenkeng. A very good evening to you, Lorato. Apologies for that, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Tsepiso, and good evening to the listeners. Thank you for hosting me.
I mean, we've seen the fact that the conflict has spread across the region, and with the mounting civilian casualties and the economic impact that we've already seen on this, just how important does social media then become, not only in shaping the perspective of what is happening on the ground, but also internationally?
So, Tsepiso, there are a couple of things, right? So, one, there's a company called Edelman. They put out a report every January called the Trust Barometer. And in there, they survey around, I think, about 28 markets across the world, and looking at government, business, civil society, and media. Interestingly, almost year on year, traditional media is becoming the least or one of the least trusted sources of information, or at least if you're looking at the four, right? So government always being the least trusted, right? And that is the first part of the worry, that if people like yourselves who, have gone to school to study and are doing this as a craft, and we're being not as trusted. The question is, where do consumers of content and information and news get their information, and what does it mean around trust? And of course, now we're seeing a high consumption of social media, particularly video first kind of content. We are now seeing that peer-to-peer sharing of information, a lot of platforms such as chat groups such as WhatsApp, they become circles of trust. And what is most worrisome is that there are then also circles where the information is passed far too many times and people almost not asking the questions. And that is where now, those who are purveyors of misinformation and disinformation literally find armament.
And just to give you an example of something that I saw on X today, a username who calls themselves Vladimir Putin, and there's a picture of Putin at on the profile pic, and the statement there is that Russia has declared war on the United States. And you can see a lot of people asking the question, why is that? Is it true? Etc., etc. But I think what it really points to is the speed and accessibility of, deep fakes, but also generative AI, how it changes images. The fact that you had that video of an attack on Dubai from what happened in 2015 in Tel Aviv. So are people aware that there is a huge danger of really falling into somebody's misinformation, information battlefield, so to speak?
I believe that to an extent people are aware, Tsepiso. So if you just go back 6 years ago at the height of the public health crisis, right, the biggest challenge that we had was really around what misinformation and disinformation was doing, where there was fear and pandemonia around people dying everywhere else, and right, and to a great extent, governments and authoritative, organizations with authority were able to almost in a very quick way, find a way of curbing that. The difference between that period and now is that One, and as you point out, generative AI has evolved a lot quicker. Previously, say if you take 2020, you literally needed to have some good skills of Photoshop for you to manipulate an image. Now in 2026, you just need to give a voice command to an application, and it does that, and it generates that kind of the kind of image that you're looking for. Make it even worse. Now, previously it used to be a little bit costly for you to be able to remove the watermarks that indicate that a video was generated by AI. There are a couple of pirate applications that then enable people to, and again to your point around how generative AI is literally now becoming the problem in that way, that previously you could, people could see with the watermarks. Now you don't even have to pay a cent for you to be able to remove that. And that is the thing that creates this video of the Burj Khalifa that was struck down, which was eventually found that it was a fake, after being seen by close to 200 million or million users on the internet. That is close to 3 times the South African population.
Are we losing the technical ability to fact check in real time?
So I think we are losing it in the sense that generative, or at least generative AI and where it is now, and its evolution is a lot quicker, is a lot faster than everyone else who's trying to almost play catch up. So if you think about the fact checkers, a lot of them are now using technology to do fact checking. And even if you look at this video that you made the example about with the Burj Khalifa being bombed, or even the other one, which was the second video that made the rounds a lot, was Tel Aviv being bombed by Iranian fighter aircraft, right? And you realize that the war is not lost, in the sense that at some point the truth comes out to say this was a manipulated footage, whether it was a footage of the old that was manipulated, or it was a completely new AI generated footage. And I guess then the question, or at least the one question that we should then be thinking a lot about, is what of the technology providers, big tech, should be at the forefront of, one, recognizing that just as there's a good that comes with this technology, they should therefore be putting in mechanisms and guardrails to ensure that they can curb this a lot more quicker, and not leave it to some independent NGOs, organizations whose jobs is just fact checking.
So I want to talk about community notes, the model. Is it
Sure.
sufficient enough for a high velocity military crisis?
It can be, and particularly because it's in the hands of big tech, right? So if you think about community nodes, particularly with X, this is a platform that is owned and run by somebody who for a very long time contributed to the lies about South Africa having white genocide and white people being persecuted in South Africa. And of course, there have been a couple of reports, both on the continent and particularly in West Europe, where around how Grok in particular has been caught out to be on the wrong side of what it is meant to do. And of course, the advantage with community nodes is that while you and I can be able to, tag a particular piece of information to be a misinformation or disinformation, it almost requires some sort of a lot more people to confirm that. And therefore, it means that if there's 20 of us and maybe only 15 are going to catch that video 2 days later, that is 2 days too late. Right? Considering that sometimes this may lead to, persecution of people, sometimes this may lead to loss of lives, or it could have actually led to, if it was caught earlier, it could have led to, saving and preserving life. So community nodes is only as good as if we are working more in a rudimentary technology time. But now with the speed of information, it is not good enough, Tsepiso.
And I want to talk about that, the fact that platforms like X, for instance, they've been flagged for, their culpability in, spreading disinformation, spreading quickly, and particularly amid conflict. What responsibility do they carry, and are there mechanisms to hold them accountable? Because if it is known, surely one would expect that there would be safeguards or a better, monitoring of these platforms and the rules.
In certain jurisdictions, it works. So, for instance, if you consider the EU, right, from a regulatory point of view, to a great extent, they are able to work as a bloc to deal with, particularly, big tech. But if you come to the continent, all the 54 jurisdictions, depend on their own local legal means, regulation, to be able to deal with a lot of this. And again, the other disparity. So if you observe in particularly in Europe, you'd find that NX would have some presence in some of the countries, whereas in South Africa, or rather on the continent, X is only headquartered in Ghana, right? And where they don't have a presence, they can do like what they did, where the South African National Editors Forum had taken, big tech to the competition commission, or to the department that deals with trade, industry, and competition. And X could literally just say, we are not going to pitch to that to that forum. There is a forum of accountability, and therefore the question that you are asking is the accountability mechanisms, right? One, when they are there, are they enough or strong enough to be able to get an X to the point where they can be accountable? Of course, we've seen in Brazil where there was a point where the government of Brazil decided that we are going to shut you down. If you're not going to be compliant, we are going to shut you down. And when they realized that the market is too huge for them not to operate, and them as in X, they decided to comply. And I guess that is the biggest thing there.
Lorato, I need to ask you a quick and final question, and it's an important one, though, and that is there's accountability. We know governments and combatants have a stake in building a narrative that suits them. But how do analysts, for instance, such as yourself, differentiate between strategic messaging and propaganda?
Oftentimes, there are patterns that we look at, right? And you can almost tell. So, for instance, now, one of the first things, if you're asking me if you're my client, I would say we need to quickly check the status of the purveyors of some of the information. You are likely to find that there are chat bots that are being used to put out this information, clickbaiting users, and the users just grab the information and share it, right? So there are a couple of patterns that we look at, but in this age of generative AI, unfortunately, it is not as apparent to the naked eye. You need, to a great extent, to also use cyber tools to ensure that you are able to pick those patterns.
Lorato, thank you so much for speaking to us on a very important subject, because a lot of people do rely on social media for their information, especially in situations like this, the latest on what is happening in the Middle East. Lorato is the CEO of Decode Communications. Lorato Tshenkeng. It brings the time to 14 minutes to 10.